An invasion of Wales is underway. Large companies, many of them based in London, are buying up land to use carbon credits. It has doubled the price of agricultural land in Wales in the last year. The Countryside Alliance says the Welsh Government is allowing rewilding and the planting of thousands of trees on a huge scale.
When Welsh Government banned shooting on NRW land based on ethics and morals, I find the fact that they are accepting these companies into Wales and giving them grant funding, and I'm finding it very difficult how they can now see that this is morally acceptable to the general public. By losing this land, we risk food security. We are reducing the amount of shooting in Wales. It's inevitable, and it's ironic that Welsh Government do not want to admit to the value of shooting in terms of conservation, land management, carbon sequestration even. Yet they are prepared to allow this to happen, to allow people to come into Wales, pilfering our land in order to offset their dirty emissions.
It's green rush, driven by greenwashing.
Welsh Government probably don't really want to take into consideration that we may lose shooting in Wales to rewilding projects. They probably want to just turn a blind eye to that. But what we must do as a shooting community is highlight all these things that are going on in the countryside, highlight this mass rewilding, this mass tree planting in order to save shooting in the future.
Shooter and farmer Eddie Field says the 3 farms next to his land in Carmarthenshire in South Wales have been sold in the last 12 months for rewilding. It means almost 500 acres around him will be planted with trees.
Is the government concerned about damaging field sports with all this rewilding? No, the government does not care. In Wales, they hate it. They are proving that. They are proving that they want to rid the countryside of field sports. There's nothing that can be done. Absolutely nothing. Unless this government leaves and they start realising that we need the countryside, we need farming for this country to survive. We've been doing it well now for a lot of years. Why stop it? Why destroy a good thing? Something that's perfect, it's balanced. In the countryside, everything we're doing is helping every aspect of it. Farming, feeding the people, maintaining the land, which looks after the animals.
Part of the reason is government grants and tax breaks. In some places in the UK, landowners can plant trees and walk away with £1,000 a hectare in profit. 1,000 hectares of forestry can earn you £1 million and get you an asset from the timber in the distant future. Farmer and shooter Gareth Wynne-Jones says farming and field sports deliver better benefits for climate change than rewilding.
We need to challenge government as well, with giving tax incentives for these things. Because I believe greenwashing, offsetting carbon shouldn't be. I know for a fact that this green grass is sequencing more carbon than trees do. You plant a tree, it won't start sequestering for 10 years, and it doesn't finish sequestering till the end of its lifetime. So really, we're just peeing in the ocean, and that's ridiculous in my opinion. Let's talk about how we can develop ways of protecting our farming families.
Eddie is a champion angler and used to fish for the England team as a teenager. He says that rewilding will affect stocks of salmon and trout in Welsh rivers.
When you plant conifer forestry, the ground becomes acidic. And as we all know how wet it gets here, okay, the runoff from that acidic water is going to go straight into these tributaries where the suin and the salmon spawn, change the pH level to a point where they won't be able to come up, they won't survive. And that's the end of the salmon and suin and some of the most famous rivers for them in Wales. The end. If they can't come up these rivers, which they've been doing for thousands of years, the same rivers that they were born in to spawn, what's left? If they can't reproduce, they're dead. They won't go up another river. They keep coming back to the same place. and that's it. There's also in those tributaries a good number of wild brown trout. And now if these wild brown trout can't get up to a good size, they die.
The Countryside Alliance in Wales says the government needs to look at the wider impact of rewilding on the rural community.
You've got to think about it in the bigger picture. So things about your heritage, your culture, losing your Welsh language, those are the things that make governments twitch a little, shall we say, rather than us basically banging on about shooting. So let's think about outside the box as a community, as a shooting community, and send that message home to politicians. That actually, it's not just shooting that is part of our heritage, culture and so on, but it's everything else in the countryside that fits in perfectly with shooting.
Gareth fears if the government doesn't listen to the field sports community, the damage of planting thousands of trees will be irreversible, as the land is unlikely to be farmed again.
I'm telling every single government to stop what they're doing before the damage is done and before we go hungry. This doesn't come every single day. This land is here for a purpose. We've managed this land. We've grazed it. We've made sure we've been able to feed the nation on it. You lose that and you are going to go hungry.
It does kind of stick in your throat a bit when you see all this great work for conservation going on through shooting in Wales, yet we have a government that simply do not want to acknowledge this. I'm not saying they don't know that shooting is hugely beneficial to improving our biodiversity and so on, but they just don't want to acknowledge it. They don't want to give you any credit for it. Yet they're willing for carbon credits to be sold, losing valuable land here in Wales that is grown food for generations.
Truly one of the saddest things that I find, and it really is one of the saddest things, is that farm, literally on the border to us, will never be farmed again. It can't happen. Once it's planted, that ground can never be used for anything else for generations. It is going to be the death of that farm. It will no longer be Penbach Farm. It will be forestry on the side of the road owned by a company that has never probably even seen it and doesn't care about it apart from the money that it can make them and offset their carbon footprint. That's it. And we are killing all of this.
The trend for planting trees and allowing carbon offset is happening across the UK, thanks to vast grants and favourable tax benefits. Some fear that if the government doesn't heed their warnings, that the benefits of shooting for the economy and well-being will be eroded.